The Michigan State Spartans had a fantastic 2021 campaign. They finished 11-2, ninth in the final AP poll, and they won their first New Year's Six bowl game since the 2014 Michigan State team did. And that team was one of the best teams that Mark D'Antonio ever fielded. It was also the best Michigan State team under D'Antonio when it came to offensive production, which relates to this 2021 team. They were 39th in the country in points per game, and that understated how efficient their offense was given the level of talent and the poor offensive line performance that they faced. Michigan State returns guys like Peyton Thorne and Jaden Reed, who are essentially the supporting cast to Kenneth Walker, who was the main character of last year's Michigan State team, if there was a movie to be made about that team. And why do I say these things? Why do I start off this video talking about last year's team? And it's like every other video talking about teams and previewing them this year, you have to start from the last chapter, especially when you have a large amount of returning characters that haven't went on to the next level in the NFL or just graduating. So that's why I start this video off this way, because guys like Jaden Reed and Peyton Thorne return, along with Trey Mosley, along with Malik Carr, who has kind of worked his way up to, by the end of the year, he was having an impact on the team at tight end, so Connor Hayward's departure won't hurt as much. And also, it's important to talk about these things just because, to lay the foundation, to see that Michigan State is trending upwards, and it's very obvious. I think that this coming year, it'll be very hard to field another 11-2 record. I actually think Michigan State won't even see double-digit wins in the regular season or the postseason. I think they'll go 8-4 at this very moment. That might change in the future. But just because there's a slight setback doesn't mean Michigan State can't obtain bigger and better things in the future. Because if Mel Tucker plays his cards right, improves the offensive line, improves the secondary, and strengthens his already strong skill positions in front seven, this team could be very dangerous within just a year or 2 or 3, whatever. But I think they have a lot of potential, and I really like what Mel Tucker is doing here. And in saying that, today I am going to do, what my plan is I'm going to read an article along the way from MichiganLive.com, from MLive. And it's talking about Michigan State's football position by position review heading into spring practice. It's reviewing each position, breaking it down by departures, key returning starters, and some new transfer portal additions and potential rising stars at each position. So I'm going to read that along while I describe areas that I'm very confident in looking at Michigan State, areas that I think they'll be great, and as a Michigan fan, from a Michigan fan perspective, areas that they will be annoying to deal with in, just for a little humor, and then areas that Spartan fans and college football fans, when trying to project what Michigan State will be, we're then going to look at areas of concern. And the secondary and offensive line, like I mentioned earlier, are, obviously the areas of most concern, while basically everything else is an area of confidence, or an area that Michigan State fans can put their hands in their pockets and smile and say, all right, this area is safe. So let's get down into business and first and foremost discuss the areas of security, the areas where Michigan State fans should feel very confident in heading into spring practice and also heading into next season. Quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and you could maybe debate, tight end, because tight end, depending on who you ask, is or is not a skill position. For the purposes of this video and how the tight end, along with college football, is being modernized, college football is more of an offensive sport than it was, a decade or two ago. I'm going to include tight ends in this position, especially because it's a strength of Michigan State's. Quarterback, for the first time since 2019, writes this article, Michigan State heads into spring without a quarterback competition because Peyton Thorne, he won the job in the fall, had a strong season, and returns as the clear starter. Expectations for him leading the offense, though, will be higher, especially with the departure of Walker. Walker was the main character, as I mentioned, and honestly, the passing game, despite Jaden Reed's, don't know why I said Jordan, despite Jaden Reed's talent, was definitely more of a supporting piece compared to the run game. Michigan State, if they could run, they wanted to run. You look at the bowl game, you look at the Ohio State game, when Michigan State had to pass, they couldn't be run first, it sometimes looked very ugly, even against teams who didn't necessarily have top 10 defenses. Because Pittsburgh and Ohio State, those defenses, they had really elite aspects to them. Pittsburgh had a really good defensive line. Ohio State had really good corners, and they have talent at every position, so even when they're not well coached, like they weren't well coached last year, they still can do damage. Those teams were not top 10 defenses. So Peyton Thorne, and part of it's the offensive line, but Peyton Thorne and the wide receivers are going to have to do an even better job over the good job they did this past season in 2021. Although Thorne gives the Spartans an established starter, you also got to remember that there are guys like Noah Kim, Hamp Fay, and now freshman Caton Hauser, who's an early enrollee in the 2022 recruiting class behind him. And those three are going to battle it out for who is probably going to be Thorne's successor. Now we move on to running back. After transferring from Wake Forest, all Walker did was post one of the best individual seasons in Michigan State history. He revived the run game. He carried that offensive line, who I think was bottom 50th in multiple categories. Again, we'll get to that later. He was a generational talent. And honestly, the job he did should give credit to Mel Tucker and the Michigan State staff for doing the job that they did. They did a wonderful job scouting him out, getting him to come to Michigan State. And when I say he carried the offensive line, it isn't a backhanded compliment. It's true. It's absolutely true. Look what happened look what happened half the time. Half the time, even in the Michigan game where he had such good numbers, that one, I think his first touchdown maybe, he bounced on the outside as his O-line was getting crushed and just used his own talent and speed to outdo even guys like Aiden Hutchinson and the linebackers, and especially the defensive tackles. Michigan's defensive tackles did a very poor job against him and Michigan State's interior offensive linemen in that game. But he willed that offensive line and that team to 11 wins. He was an elite player. He is not given the praise he deserves. Even though he is given a lot of praise, he deserves even more. I think he should have went to New York, and I think he probably at minimum should have finished third or second best in voting, if not possibly won the award. Did Bryce Young dice up possibly the best defense in recent memory in Georgia? Yes, but Alabama had other guys at quarterback that probably, maybe not could have done the same thing, but could have led them to an SEC championship game appearance. Without Walker, Michigan State might have been looking at a 7-5 season, and I bet you that's possibly true. And without him, Michigan State improving will show that they're on the right direction. If they just go 8-4 or 9-3, that's how phenomenal of a player he was. But you have guys like Elijah Collins, Jordan Simmons, Harold Joyner as well, his three main backups. So Michigan State does have depth there. They're not the same players Walker is, but that doesn't mean they can't be good. And Michigan State is bringing in Wisconsin transfer Jalen Berger and Colorado transfer Jarek Broussard. Berger is already, I think, enrolled at Michigan State. Broussard is graduating from Colorado in May and will arrive in the summer. I think Broussard is much better. He played in a far worse system than Berger did and posted better stats. He's a more explosive player. I like Broussard here, and I think that at the end of the day, he will get the starting job. I don't even know how much playing time Berger will receive. I don't know if he's really that much better than Jordan Simmons or even Elijah Collins. We'll have to see. But Michigan State has depth at running back. Wide receiver, we don't really need to spend nearly as much time on as running back because the main star of the show and Jaden Reed returns, along with starter Trey Mosley, and you got some depth players who one of them is going to have to become a starter in Monterey Foster, Terry Lockett Jr., Keon Coleman, and Christian Fitzpatrick. Michigan State also signed 4 receivers to its 2022 recruiting class, including 4-star Jeremy Bernard, who enrolled in January. And also, you finally have tight end with Malik Carr, who is returning. You also have Illinois transfer Daniel Barker, who is listed as a 4-star on 24/7 Sports transfer portal rankings. So Michigan State's very strong at skill positions. It is a absolute strength of theirs. And on defense, with defensive tackles and linebackers, it's the exact same thing. The Spartans, in my opinion, have the best defensive tackle group in the Big Ten. You look at Simeon Barrow, Jacob Slade, effective pass rushers, effective run stoppers. They return very good defensive tackle depth. You have key contributors Deshaun Mallory, Jalen Hunt, and Maverick Hansen. So a very deep defensive tackle room. Defensive ends, there might be a lack of depth to a certain degree with Jacob Panashuk, Drew Beasley, and backup Drew Jordan leaving. But Jeff Pietrowski should be poised to take over the starting spot, while Michael Fletcher and Brandon Wright could also take some starting spots. And Florida transfer Chris Bogle comes in. That's defensive ends, but overall, focusing on the defensive tackle group, it's very deep. It's the best in the Big Ten. The defensive end position isn't really a concern or an area of security. It's like I mentioned before, it's an area where Michigan State fans can feel all right or okay about. But defensive ends are primarily pass rushers, as we know, and when it comes to pass rush, the Michigan State linebackers might be able to take over in that area if the defensive ends aren't really good. Because at linebacker, you have Cal Halliday, you have Quavarius Crouch, you have Aaron Brule, who's transferring from Mississippi State, and Jacoby Windmon as well. So that's four potent linebackers, and I guarantee you one of them might play at the defensive end position, possibly. So very versatile linebacker area. They were good in coverage when they had to be in coverage. They were really the main guys, especially Halliday, who supported the defensive line in blitzes or when stopping the run or getting to the quarterback. The linebackers are full of do-everything guys. And with the secondary being as bad as it is, and I don't see how it's going to improve to a great deal, might improve a little bit, but I think until a lot of those secondary players and possibly the secondary coach Harlan Barnett himself is weeded out, the linebackers are going to need to help out that group. And a very need to help out that group in coverage and possibly help out the defensive line. But not to worry, it's a very talented area. They might be the best linebacker group in the Big Ten as well. I think they contend with Nebraska in that regard. Them, Nebraska, probably schools like Michigan, some other Big Ten West schools, maybe like Wisconsin with Nick Herbig. They all have very good linebacker groups, and Michigan State's among a lot of the better schools when it comes to returning linebacker production and how good their linebackers are. So these are areas of security. And also one other thing, Michigan State definitely upgraded its pass rush with the hiring of, I think his name is Brandon Jordan as a pass rush specialist, and Marco Coleman from Georgia Tech. I don't know how good they will be in the long term necessarily, or even the short term. I haven't done a lot of reading on these guys. Brandon Jordan has worked with individual people, but it's interesting to see how he can lead a group of young men, because leading multiple people versus working one-on-one is a whole different story, but it's going to be interesting. I think a change, especially when it comes to targeting the bigger offensive lines that State often struggled to face, it's a good thing. It certainly shows that Tucker is looking to improve an already strong group, but will admit I am completely unsure how it's going to work out. Therefore, I can't really have an opinion on it. But now we're going to move on to areas of concern. These are all areas, the linebacker core, the defensive tackle group, and every skill position on offense, Michigan State fans should feel very good about, should feel excellent about. But these areas, the secondary, outside of Henderson, who I have a lot of respect for, he's very good, and the offensive line should be taken with extreme caution. The secondary outside of Henderson, I will go as far to say they cannot be trusted one bit. You look at the Ohio State game, and that was just, we don't even need to talk about that. But look at the Michigan game. Cade McNamara passing for close to 400 yards is an atrocity. It is an atrocity to mankind. And then you look at J.J. McCarthy, you add those numbers together, it's over 400 yards. And that was a game where Michigan actually tried to run the football maybe a little too much. And State held their ground for the most part in the run game, especially when it mattered most. But there are other games as well, like letting Indiana complete the amount of downfield passes they did with poor QB play. It shouldn't be allowed. Michigan State secondary, they allowed, 26 more yards per game in passing than Duke. And Duke was the second worst secondary when it comes to yards allowed in a game in the nation. Michigan State's amongst teams like Duke, New Mexico State, UL Monroe, Hawaii, Georgia Southern. The only other good team that I can speak of next that's like good, who I think beat a Power 5 opponent, would be SMU. And I think they went 8-4, 9-4, 8-5. I forget, but they were around there. And what does this mean? Well, it means that Mel Tucker and, gosh, why am I forgetting the defensive coordinator's name? I know him all the time, but whatever. Maybe I'll figure out the name later. It means that they did a very good job of improvising. Scotty Hazelton is his name. I'm sorry, it was on the tip of my tongue. But Scotty Hazelton, that means he was very good at improvising and very good at being able to adjust and compensate for the ineptitude of the secondary and also hiding it. Until the Michigan game, I don't think teams truly realized how bad the unit was, and therefore they didn't target it to the same degree. But let me tell you something this year. Teams are going to explicitly target this group unless it massively improves. There's going to need to be even more compensation if this group doesn't take a complete positive trend, a complete reverse of what was previous to the 2021 season. Xavier Henderson was really the only good player. And you look at the other guys. You look at guys like Angelo Gross, Darius Snow, Ronald Williams, Chester Kimbrough, Marquis Lowry, where Tucker and the staff did well with offensive transfers, specifically Kenneth Walker, but also, Malik Carr, also with Quavarius Crouch, the linebacker. They did very poorly with defensive back talent, very poorly. Xavier Henderson was a D'Antonio recruit and a D'Antonio player, and he had a fantastic year this year with the supporting cast at secondary that he had. Chester Kimbrough, safe to say he's pretty bad. Same with the other transfers that I mentioned, at least from my knowledge and what I've seen. If you disagree, you can always comment down below. I love debating and talking our differences over. And if you truly know something that I don't know, tell me down below as well. I'm always willing to learn things that I don't know because, like every other human on this earth, but especially myself, I do not know everything. And finally, the offensive line was subpar last year, and it does lose some starters, for sure. Let's go to the article and read a little bit about the offensive line. Michigan State's offensive line was improved last season, and it obviously didn't hurt to have Walker in the backfield. Bingo. Continuing that progress will be a challenge with a reworked front five. The Spartans lost a trio of starters on the offensive line and tackle A.J. Arcuri, center Matt Allen, and guard tackle Kevin Jarvis, along with veteran depth. They return only 5 offensive linemen with playing experience in college, and that's what roughly projects as the starting 5 right now at left tackle. Jarrett Horst, left guard DJ Dunplane, center Nick Samak, right guard Mac Carrick, and right tackle Spencer Brown. Michigan State will need young players to develop quickly and fill out the two deep position. And after the offensive line story linked below was posted, the Spartans received a commitment last week from Washington State transfer Brian Green. He is a veteran with experience at center and guard who should be a notable contributor this fall. And the article referenced was an article within this article. Again, this article by NLive will be linked down below. I always like to cite the sources that I use for my videos. But Michigan State's offensive line having a lot of departures, not having a lot of veterancy, and also the departure of obviously the best player on the team, it's going to hurt the run game. I don't see a situation in which the run game gets better, which is why Michigan State, again, like I said, the skill position players, especially the pass game, is going to have to be so much better for Michigan State to replicate that 11-2 season. It's going to have to be. And if the secondary doesn't improve, which, yes, they return a lot, but is that necessarily a good thing? When it finished, I think, 131st or the worst in the nation in pass yards allowed. It was clutch in some situations, but what's going to happen when it's targeted more if it doesn't improve as much? These things into consideration, the concerns, the losing of Walker, loss of a lot of offensive line experience, are the reasons that I think this team will go 8-4. They'll be competitive. They can beat Michigan. They have a very high ceiling. This team does, I think. I think that they, can beat everyone except Ohio State, and that's because I think Ohio State's that good. Michigan State doesn't have the same mental lock and focus on OSU that they do on Michigan, and it's a fact. Michigan State last year against Michigan played on a whole outer space level. It was fascinating to watch their mental toughness, which Mel Tucker has instilled in them since day one. But they can beat anyone except Ohio State, in my opinion. But they could also lose to about half of their schedule. This team is volatile. I'm not exactly confident in my prediction of them, but what I am confident in is the direction they are heading over the next few years. I do think Mel Tucker, I don't know if he's going to win the national title or even win a playoff game. It's a very hard thing to do. But the university is all in. He's a good coach. And in saying that, it would not surprise me if he won the Big Ten once or maybe even twice over the next, 5 to 10 years. And maybe he'll even go above and beyond what I'm saying. I was just laying kind of what I expect to happen. Michigan State's on track to being back to where they were under D'Antonio, or around there, which is, winning the Big Ten a few times and being competitive and going to New Year's Six Bowls and maybe even reaching the playoff once. So the areas of concern, again, the secondary, the offensive line, and to conclude this video, going back to the areas of, positivity would most likely be, again, skill position players, the linebackers, and the defensive tackles. And that's really all I have to say for this video. If you like this video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. I am a Michigan fan, but I view myself as pretty unbiased. I have a take for most Big Ten teams. I try to look at them with a level head, ignore my urge to have, Michigan go 12-0. I'm very high on them, but I try to be unbiased, try to give my honest, genuine opinion. And yeah, Michigan State's on the right track. Tucker is coming. He is already here. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys around. Bye.